pantoum. And a pantoum is a form poem, which means, like a haiku, it has a few rules. So pantoums started in Malaysia hundreds of years ago, and before they were even written down, they were passed along in spoken language. You're going to notice that there's some repeated lines in this poem. So that's the form to it, and those repeated lines can make it sound pretty mesmerizing, kind of like a dream. So let's first take a look at the form. When you're writing, you'll want a copy of this page up so you can make sure you repeat the correct lines. A pantoum is broken up by stanzas, and stanzas are in groups of 4 lines each. So your first stanza, you'll have lines 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then in the second stanza, you'll put a little line break in there. In the second stanza, line 5, you'll want to repeat line 2. Line 6 will be a new line. Line 7 will be the same as line 4. Line 8 will be a new line. Then a stanza break, new stanza. Line 9 will be the same as line 6. Line 10 will be a new line. Line 11 will be the same as line 8. Line 12 will be a new line. And I would shoot for at least 12 lines, but then you can keep going with this pattern as long as you want. There's just a little difference once you get to the last stanza. So say your final stanza is lines 17 through 20. Line 17 would be the same as line 14. Line 18 would be the same as line 3, so going all the way back to the first stanza. Line 19 is the same as line 16, and then line 20 is the same as line 1, going back to the first line of the poem. So the challenge of this poem is to move the poem forward and say new things in the poem, even though you're repeating lines. So we're going to start by looking at an example of a pantoum from the Great Depression to help make sense of this form. And if you guys haven't learned about the Great Depression, it was a time in the 1930s, so now almost 90 years ago, where a lot of people were out of work, huge numbers of unemployment, a lot of poverty, and it really affected so many people around the country, much like the last year the pandemic has. So I want you to, as I'm reading this, I want you to notice what feeling you get from this poem, what emotion it has to it, because often pantoums have a pretty distinctive feeling to them. Pantoum of the Great Depression. Our lives avoided tragedy simply by going on and on, without end and with little apparent meaning. Oh, there were storms and small catastrophes. Simply by going on and on, we managed. No need for the heroic. Oh, there were storms and small catastrophes. I don't remember all the particulars. We managed. No need for the heroic. There were the usual celebrations, the usual sorrows. I don't remember all the particulars. Across the fence, the neighbors were our chorus. There were the usual celebrations, the usual sorrows. Thank God no one said anything in verse. The neighbors were our only chorus, and if we suffered, we kept quiet about it. At no time did anyone say anything in verse. It was the ordinary pities and fears consumed us, and if we suffered, we kept quiet about it. No audience would ever know our story. It was the ordinary pities and fears consumed us. We gathered on porches, the moon rose, we were poor. What audience would ever know our story? Beyond the windows shone the actual world. We gathered on porches, the moon rose, we were poor, and time went by, drawn by slow horses. Somewhere beyond our windows shone the world. The Great Depression had entered our souls like fog. And time went by, drawn by slow horses. We did not ourselves know what the end was. The Great Depression had entered our souls like fog. We had our flaws, perhaps a few private virtues. But we did not ourselves know what the end was. People like us simply go on. We have our flaws, perhaps a few private virtues, but it is by blind chance only that we escape tragedy. There is no plot in that. It is devoid of poetry. So what lines from this poem stood out? Did you get the sense of how challenging the depression was from this poem? To me, this poem has a feeling of resilience, that ability to just keep surviving, keep going, make the most of the difficult circumstances. Did you notice how he expanded on those repeated lines, right, with new lines? And because you repeat those lines, it requires you to be creative about what directions you go from there. One option with these Pantoums today is to write about your experience of the pandemic that you all have lived through. We all have lived through over the last year. So what's been your day by day lived experience of it? How have your routines changed? What have you observed changing around you? What has been the overall emotion you felt? And maybe that has shifted throughout the year. You might want to use a metaphor to express that feeling, that emotion of the pandemic, as this 8th grade student did in this next example poem. The rain. The pandemic is like the rain. The rain is sad and causes flooding. The rain is cold and hard and causes flooding, and we are getting sucked under. It's cold and hard like an icy road at night. We are getting sucked under, hoping we get saved. Like an icy road at night, we slip and slide but try to push on, hoping we get saved. Over time, we slip and slide but try to push on. The rain is sad. Over time, the pandemic is too. By Tanner. In writing about the pandemic, you also don't have to necessarily give it a sad or negative feel. You can write about what has maybe changed in positive ways within your house, right? Or something, maybe perhaps you've taken up an unexpected hobby, right, during the pandemic, or seen your dad grow a pandemic beard, or just seen things change in unexpected ways. But if you do, so you can write about your experience of the pandemic, but if you want to write about something else, Pantoums can really be written about any subject. Often with that repetition, those repeated lines, you go in unexpected and imaginative directions. So I'll leave you with one final student example of a Pantoum that has a really dreamlike qualities, kind of exploring dreams. It really shows those mysterious, strange qualities dreams can sometimes take on. Because birds are gliding across your brain, I rise into the shadows, and the mist is rolling in because my breath is rolling out. I rise into the shadows like a pawn that went to sleep. Because my breath is rolling out, you hear doorbells in the wood. Like a pawn that went to sleep and woke up inside a dream, you hear doorbells in the woods, though the woods are in a dream. And woke up inside a dream, although the air is filled with blue and white clouds, though the woods are in the dream, a good idea can smell like pine trees. Although the air is filled with blue and white clouds, I am filled with ideas about dreams. A good idea can smell like pine trees, and a dream can grow like a cloud. I am filled with ideas about dreams. The stars don't know what they mean, and a dream can grow like a cloud. You can't explain this bigness. The stars don't know what they mean, and the mist is rolling in. You can't explain this bigness because birds are gliding across your brain. So with these Pantoums, you'll notice some of the poets make some changes, some alterations to lines, right? They might add in or take away some words. They might add in some punctuation. And don't be afraid to do that to help it fit best. So now it's your turn to write a Pantoum. And if you're struggling, just try and get those first 4 lines down in the first stanza, because then you'll start repeating lines, right? So you can have each line be an observation or have it be an action. And then once you've got those first 4 lines, you'll start repeating lines, and you can let yourself go in new creative directions and work off those repeated lines. So I look forward to reading these and seeing you guys read them.